Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the West Ham Network. Anton here, bringing you a little cheeky morning update. Now, you're seeing lots of signings coming in for West Ham. It's exciting times, it really is, but it's not going to stop here. And we've spoken a lot about a particular player, a French international, whom we think maybe for the past couple of days or weeks is off limits. But it doesn't look like that. It does not look like that. The player we are talking about is Jean-Claire Todibo, as you can see from that image there. Now, apparently, the situation was that Juventus had agreed personal terms with the centre back. They had reached an agreement with Nice over a transfer structure. Well, sorry, they hadn't agreed a transfer structure with Nice, but they had agreed personal terms with the player as he was favouring a move to Juventus. However, they are struggling to get that transfer structure in place together, and that has potentially paved the way for West Ham to come in and try and snatch the player. Now, apparently, we've reached an agreement with the club for the central defender, whose, of course, his head was turned for the big Italian giants, and he seems to be really keen to join them. That seems to be where he wants to go. And I think I can understand why some West Ham fans would be a little bit concerned about why West Ham would want to push forward and trying to bring him into West Ham if he doesn't want to be here. But apparently Nice are rejecting any proposals involving an initial loan, even if they include an obligation to buy. They insist simply on a permanent transfer, setting the asking price for 35 million euros. And they're just simply, I believe, fed up with the negotiations that Juventus are taking for their prized asset. And that's having a big detrimental effect to the transfer moving forward. Now, we talk a lot about players that come into the club and what they could potentially offer to the club and what kind of style of play they are. And we are obviously in need of bringing in some central defensive players. Now, what I will say to you is Todibo is renowned, absolutely renowned for his confidence and ability on the ball, which he was and gains from his experience of playing as a holding midfielder when he was a young player. That's all his position was, a holding midfield player in his youth career. And he takes a lot of touches as a defender. Apparently, on average, he attempts 85 passes per game, which really would suit into a Lopetegui. I think you can see why very quickly Lopetegui would want a player like that who's very comfortable on the ball, and that puts him within top 5% of central defenders in Europe's top 5 leagues. He also averages roughly around about nearly 90% pass completion rate, which again is right high up there. He rates highly for progressive carries of the ball and successful take-ons. So he's really comfortable on the ball, really comfortable at going forward with it as well. But his ability with the ball at his feet does not come at the expense of his, aptitude at other parts of the game, because he's so strong. He's such a strong player, and he's still got a lot of potential. He knows how to defend in tight spaces and wide areas, and he can attack as well as defend. So this is a player I really would hope that West Ham could try and convince to come in. And listen, we can't rule this one out definitely, because there is going to be a struggle here with Juventus. Juventus are not just going to go and splash the cash, because that's just not what they do. That's what these clubs do not do, especially when they're cash stripped as much as they are. So keep your eye on the Todibo deal, because it looks like West Ham are potentially holding out for their man, and if they can convince him to come to the club, then they'll push forward with that deal to bring him into the club. Let me know your thoughts. It is D-Day, probably over the next couple of days. I put D-Day, it might not be today. I did suggest it would be 24 hours. You'll probably find out some more information, and already within that 24 hours, you're hearing that Juventus are struggling to come to terms with the deal that what the French club are wanting. But I think that's maybe why we're starting to see a bit of a delay in West Ham moving on other transfer targets. I think they'll set themselves a deadline of when they can wait to see if he's willing to come. And I think we've got the relevant people in there in charge to be able to convince him to come in. And this is the player I want in our defence. Him, Kilman, Agerd, I'd love that more than anything. I really would. The three of them and Mavropanos. That would be our 4 central defenders, and I'd be really happy with those 4 moving forward. Let me know in the comments. Leave the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, join us later on for the West Ham Daily, and come on, you Irons.